Hi, this is Roz Stendahl with a little book review on two books I just picked up. And it is Thursday, October 10th at 1 p.m. Normally, I don't review something until I've actually read it in its entirety. But I was so excited about these two books that I'm going to look at today that I couldn't wait to share them with you. The first is called The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen. And it's a paperback book, and it's published by Biblioasis. I think that might be how they pronounce it. It's really cool. It is exactly what it says. It's a notebook, the history of thinking on paper, how people use notebooks, and when paper first more readily in the West got available and how it changed art and so on. I wanted to take a moment to read one passage to you because I found it so interesting scientifically, something that I've always understood intellectually because of what happens in my brain when I draw. So I'm quoting here from the book. MRI scans have been around since the late 1990s when they were invented at the University of Nottingham. They can detect and record many aspects of anatomy and physiology, including the flow of blood around the brain. In 1999, an experiment was designed by Robert Solso, an American professor of psychology, to use MRI technology to discover what might distinguish a trained professional artist. Solso specializes in the intersections between psychology and art, and he judged Ocean to be a perfect subject due to his many years of diligent drawing, quantified by Solso at 3 to 5 hours a day. Back then, MRI scanners were still rare beasts, so Ocean flew to California for the experiment, which took place at the only available hour, 2 o'clock in the morning. With his head secured in the cramped, noisy aperture of the scanner, Solso had Ocean draw rapid pencil portraits from photos pasted into a small sketchbook while he monitored the flow of blood around his brain. An untrained control subject then took on the same task. The MRI revealed that the control subject drew portraits using the right posterior parietal area, the brain's facial recognition module, with which we recognize people and judge their mood. Ocean was also drawing faces, but that part of his brain was quiet. Instead, the blood rushed to the right middle frontal area associated with spatial awareness, the part of the brain whose usual purpose is to stop us from bumping into things as we walk. Ocean's working mind, the scan revealed, didn't consider the face as a face, but a collection of shapes. This let him create a recognizable likeness while the amateur hardly used the front of his brain and couldn't. The difference in quality between the two sets of drawings was striking. Solso's experiment, subsequently replicated and refined, changed the way we think about artists at work. It showed that to create a realistic figurative image, one that looks like the subject, you have to do something that doesn't come naturally, and if you're painting a portrait, actively disengage the parts of the brain that instinct tells you to call upon. Quote, "The MRI proved something scientifically that I already knew," reflected Ocean when we spoke. When you see somebody you know, you say, "Hello, John, hello, Mary," what have you. You recognize that person. But when you draw John and Mary, you use a different part of the brain, the bit you use when you're maneuvering around a piece of furniture. He gestured at the table in front of us, loaded with books, papers, and pictures. It's a spatial thing. End internal quote. So I wanted you to just hear that and see what happens in the brain. People who've been drawing for a long time and have made that mental shift experience this. If you're drawing and you're frustrated, listen to what people are telling you about ignoring the naming of things or the things themselves and draw the shapes, draw the shadow shapes, draw the negative spaces, and you'll have a much better time advancing in your drawing of portraits. So that was just a little side note from this book about how people use paper to think. So I hope that you will get this and read this. It's a fascinating book. The next book I have to share with you today is The Work of Art, How Something Comes from Nothing by Adam Moss. And I'm excited about this book on a whole bunch of different levels. The contents of it, if you're interested in process, he interviews a number of creative people. Not all of them are artists. There's architects, there's some chefs, different types of people, all doing something creative. And he talks about their process. And so that's interesting. So if you're interested in process, this is definitely a book that you want to read. It also, for most of my students, they've been really inundated with a lot of books of visual artists and their sketchbooks, and so this includes writers and other creatives. So I think it gives you a broad spectrum of people to look at and understand their process. The second thing about this book is it's just visually, as a graphic designer, I just love this book, the little, what I think of as quirky things that the designer did with the book to get the material across. And I just wanted to flip through a couple of pages here. It is published by Penguin Press. My recollection is that it is an expensive book. I think I spent over $40 for it. But I am unable to resist books on process, and I'm really glad I didn't resist this one because it is quite something. So, so a lot of different people you can see here. Some of the names might be familiar to you. Some of them you won't maybe recognize until you actually get into the piece and you see their art. This, just to show you, this is the beginning of the interesting way the book is laid out. Here is a sketch, a thumbnail sketch. It's made by Frank Gehry, the famous architect. And there's a little thing that says, how does, and then there's a dot and a little red line, become this. And that's a fun little way to start the book, but it's also useful in that he will use this to draw from other areas, going back and forth. So this little note here, you'll have a little line that goes over here and over the page and hits and points to this illustration. It's not unlike what you see in handwritten, hand-illuminated manuscripts where they had this kind of notation and arrowing marking system. So that's very interesting. The other thing I like is that he puts the footnotes right on the page. I love that. That's very important to me. And I love the way that he's got a basic width of text and breaking into it visually. That's very fun and interesting. So all of those types of things make this a visual joy to look at and fun to read. And we'll get to another page here. Where again, he's got the original pages of his lyrics written out in longhand, and then a little note thing here, and it points over to these. I just love it. It tickles me. It tickles the designer in me. I love drawings especially, and then he comes over to here, and so that's fun. So he follows various artists, and they discuss their materials and what happens, and their process. And Tony Kushner, famous playwright, screenwriter, various different things. It's just a visually rich book. It's an ideas-rich book. It's a process-rich book. And I think that if you're interested in process, here's Roz Chess, the famous cartoonist whose work is often seen in the New Yorker magazine and in the books that she writes and puts together. And here's her process. So again, just fascinating. just a joy. And so I can't even finish reading it before I tell you about it, because I really am enjoying it so much. So again, The Work of Art by Adam Moss, and don't forget The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen. I hope that this has been interesting for you to see what's out there, and I hope that you'll seek these books out. I'm not connected to the publishers or the authors in any way. I'm just very intrigued by both these books. You have a great day, get some sketching done, and we'll catch up with you later. Bye-bye.